Now, frustrated parents have been making their way to the Gauteng Department of Education head offices in Johannesburg. With over 280,000 online applications received, it has not been smooth sailing for all those applying for grades 1 and 8 spaces in Gauteng's public schools for the year 2020. Our reporter Mahlako Komane has more.
Yes, good afternoon indeed. We are here at the Gauteng Education Department's head offices in Johannesburg, and we will be talking to Steve Mabona. Lemara just say that we know that yesterday, just to recap, yesterday the online application system that the province uses went online yesterday at 8 o'clock in the morning. We understand that some schools by now have received over 3,000 applications thus far. At the top of my head, those schools would be your Northcliffe High, your Boksburg High, your Acacia, President, Monjo is also there, Pretoria Girls High, are just some of the schools that are just very popular with parents. Those are the schools that since yesterday are sitting at some actually with over 4,000 applications. But Steve will actually also talk to us about that. And also we understand that there are some teething problems. We'll understand that the online application was brought forward by a week. We started yesterday. It was meant to commence on the 12th of May, but instead it went live on the 20th because there were certain additions that needed to be made to the system after some bodies complained to the department, threatening to interdict them. Changes were then made, but we're understanding parents are saying that they are experiencing problems with these maps that have been added to the system, with some of them saying that instead of making it to the waiting list 1, they are instead moved to waiting list 4. But Mr. Mabona then did tell us that this is being attended to, but I am going to speak to him right now, and he's going to explain what are the recourses that they've put in place, what are the changes that have been made in the last 24 hours to the system, also with parents complaining that they are unable to apply for twins. Twins are being given different schools, but I understand that's also been fixed. Let me just ask Mr. Mabona. Mr. Mabona, thank you so much for talking at us. Can you just tell us, the teething problems, the maps are a serious challenge. Parents are complaining about the different waiting lists. Parents saying that they live literally next door to the school, but they find themselves being allocated a 30-kilometer radius distance from the school. What have you done to address some of these issues?
Look, we need to acknowledge that we had some teething problems. Among those, it's the issue of the maps, which were a challenge. You'll remember that the issue of maps, we're talking about your feeder zones. Parents, when they were accessing the system, they could not, click the home address, and then they opted for your within, 30-kilometer radius, which gave them the list of schools. But because the system is, programmed that if you use a 30-kilometer radius, you will be on waiting list 4. So automatically all those parents, irrespective of their addresses being closer to school, the system, because it's system driven, generated those reference numbers, which is waiting list 4. But we have since rectified that. We are working very tirelessly just to make sure that all those parents that will be coming, just make sure that you utilize your home address, and you will then be in a position to can receive the reference number that is applicable, which is WA1. But all those that have applied, they don't need to panic because we have them in the system. What they need to do, they must just forward their necessary documents to schools, submit there. But administratively, we should be in a position as the department to rectify that because we know them. And all those that will still be applying, we just caution them that if you utilize your within 30-kilometer radius, must know that the reference that you're going to get there, it's not the one that you expect, which is a WA1. So just be mindful that you might need to look very closely and access the home address. But we know that because of the lack of connectivity in some areas, so parents struggled to access the home address. Hence, they then opted for the 30-kilometer, radius. But make sure that there's connectivity, because we've realized that in areas where there was Wi-Fi, was low, most of those parents could not, successfully be in the system. So the Google Chrome, we've realized that it's quite effective. Parents are advised to utilize Google Chrome, and those that are utilizing your cell phones, those are very effective according to information at our disposal.
And also on the siblings issue, especially where you have triplets, twins, what have you done here? What were the problems there, and how did you manage to fix that?
We've realized that some parents were struggling to, register their children, most especially your twins and triplets. But we've since rectified that administratively. Our guys, like as we've indicated, they're sleeping lesser, and we're making sure that we monitor very closely any problem that arises. Then we are in a position to can address it as quick as possible. So we were aware of that, and it has been rectified, and we are happy that at least moving forward we're not going to be having such a problem.
And also, we know, obviously, we are expecting some schools. Some schools are historically high-pressure schools. They're very popular. What's going on at these schools? I mean, when you're sitting at 4,000 schools, we know capacity. There is no school with 4,000 grade 8 spaces. What are you doing with these? Are you removing them from the system? Are you continuing to let parents continue applying there, irrespective of the fact that we know that at the very most, a school would sit with 300 open spaces for grade 8 at the very most?
Look, we cannot, rush to remove them from the system. I mean, it's day 2. But for us, we have, availed the numbers. Those that will be in a position to read, we've availed the numbers. I mean, the schools that we have mentioned earlier, they've actually reached over 3,000 applications. So that's an indication that if you are sitting on your system and applying for such school, you must know that you might not probably access the school. So it's important for you to look out for those schools that we are announcing to say they've reached more than 3,000 applications. So it tells you that you really probably need to avoid them and opt for other schools. But that we don't have a school that will have more than 300 seats in terms of your allocation of learners. So that's why we have to caution parents that those that have reached capacity according to what we have in the system, then they need to be avoided as much as possible. But we need to caution parents again. When they submit documents at some schools, we understand that they compel them to receive some administrative forms, and to an extent that they compel them to give evidence or proof of income or any other additional information. We just want to caution the schools that they don't need to do that. And we've heard that most especially your single medium, your African school, they just give you an Afrikaans form and say, but that is an Afrikaans single medium. Look, there's no admission policy at any of the single medium schools, most especially Afrikaans. So the administrators there, they must know, they must stop this thing of telling our people that they are an Afrikaans single medium, because the HOD must ratify their admission policy. We're still waiting for their admission policies. So they can't tell people that they are a single medium, most especially Afrikaans. I mean, while we've encouraged parents that live in those areas that they need to apply to those schools, so that when numbers are compelling that they need to introduce an English class, they must do that. So they can't tell parents that they will give them an Afrikaans only form for them to fill, and if they don't fill that form, they're not going to accept their documents. It's unacceptable, and parents are encouraged to tell us if they experience such challenges, so that we can then deal with those schools.
Talking about that, single medium schools, I do remember that last year you had issues around that Midrand Centurion corridor, the Tshwane East. What are the numbers looking like there this year? Are you going to be able to accommodate everybody that's looking for space? I know that there was a school that had to be singularly for grade 8s because the demand was just that high. What's it looking like this year?
Look, the demand will always be high in those areas, most especially that you have so many of your African schools there, and the people are resisting to open doors there. It's quite sad, and we are monitoring the situation very closely, because we really need to be accommodative when coming to schools. So we will go back and check, but then parents need to bear with us. I mean, we can assist as much as possible, but where we don't have space, really it will be impossible for us to accommodate more parents or more learners at those schools. So those that have applied, they will be considered. You remember the criteria, it's those that live closer to the school. They will receive priority. That's why we are saying those that did not receive your WA1 and they are supposed to be receiving it, those parents, we just want to allay their fears. We are aware about that challenge, and most of them, they've experienced it because of the capacity of your connectivity and all that. But then that is being addressed, and we are satisfied that our technicians are working tirelessly to make sure that that is accommodated.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mabona. And as you've heard right there, that was Mr. Steve Mabona from the Department of Education.